All aboard! Conor Knighton is taking us way off the beaten track through the scenery and history of Alaska.
All aboard!
Morning. Welcome aboard.
Most of the passengers taking this train are tourists.
Hey, let's go! Let's go!
Known as the Coastal Classic Route, this section of the Alaska Railway travels the 114 miles between the cities of Anchorage and Seward in style. Along the way, riders are treated to stunning views of mountains and glaciers. Ever-ready cameras capture sightings of mountain goats and moose. This is the Alaska people travel to see.
Where are you folks from?
Mississippi.
Mississippi, long ways from home. Well, welcome. Where do you live?
Conductor Warren Redfern has been working on the railroad since he was 19 years old.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's still spectacular because it's different every day. The clouds are different, the sun hits the glaciers different, the wildlife is different.
A lot has changed since the Alaska Railroad was completed a century ago. While today the tracks parallel the highway for large portions of the route, rail was once the only reliable way to travel across the state by land. In 1923, President Warren Harding traveled to Alaska, then still a U.S. territory, to celebrate the opening of the federally funded railroad. In this footage, colorized by Smithsonian Channel, Harding can be seen driving the Golden Spike in the town of Nenana, officially connecting Seward in the south all the way up to Fairbanks in the north. Gold was on everyone's mind back then.
It really was to open up the interior of Alaska for commerce. So coal, gold, oil, they hoped, freight. They got the train.
Aaron Leggett is the senior curator of Alaska history and indigenous cultures at the Anchorage Museum, which is currently featuring an exhibit on the 100th anniversary of the railroad.
So this 1985 to present, these pictures were taken by my dad.
Leggett comes from a long line of railroad employees. He worked for the railroad back in high school, but his ancestors were also displaced by it. He's the president of the native village of Eklutna, the only federally recognized tribe inside Anchorage, a city which used to be a small fishing town.
I was made very aware from a very young age that Anchorage would not exist the way we know it today were it not for the Alaska Railroad.
Today, Anchorage is by far the largest city in the state. But the federal government eventually found that maintaining the railroad, which winds through some pretty treacherous terrain, wasn't cost-effective.
I always say railroading in Alaska is not for the faint of heart.
Bill O'Leary is the president and CEO of the Alaska Railroad Corporation. In the 1980s, the state purchased the railroad with the provision that it would operate like a self-sustaining business.
I think the recognition at the federal level was that we have this asset that we can't care for anymore. And the recognition at the state level that this is too important to Alaska not to have it operating.
The railroad currently makes around 60% of its revenue from freight. Sure, there are roads to the major cities now, but it's still more cost-effective and reliable to use rail. But one section of the line remains a lifeline for people who live in the entirely roadless wilderness north of Talkeetna. The Hurricane Turn service is the last flag stop service of its kind in the country. At any point along the route, you can flag down the train and get picked up.
Thanks for picking us up.
If you've got to go into town, if you've got a doctor's appointment, what do you do?
Well, you just plan.
Thank you. All right. Have a good day.
Jack DeMarchi asked the conductor to drop him off at his cabin in the woods. He staked a claim out here in the 1980s and built a place for himself. During the summer months, the train does one round trip a day. It's a mix of locals heading to and from their cabins and tourists out for some sightseeing.
Oh, wow.
One sight they're almost certain to see is Shannon Cartwright.
Which is one of my favorites.
Cartwright, a children's book illustrator from Michigan, has lived off-grid in Alaska for 46 years.
They thought I was crazy, and then especially when I'm getting older, they say, Shannon, you gotta leave.
And how do you feel about that?
Every time I think about leaving, I don't. And I want to live here as long as I can.
How often do you take the train back into town?
I try to go in just every couple months.
Cartwright has illustrated more than 30 books, which have sold more than 1 million copies. She says the solitude allows her to focus.
Any book that you've got, to illustrate, it's a lot of work. And so living like this has been wonderful.
Cartwright built a shop of sorts right along the tracks. At some point each afternoon, she never quite knows when, the train will come by and briefly stop to allow passengers a quick visit.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you for letting us stop by.
Much appreciated. Thank y'all.
One time with people lasts about 15 minutes. Train comes and then the train goes.
The trains here don't go to any other state. The railroad's primary mission is to connect Alaskans with Alaska. As part of that charge, the railroad offers a tour guide training program for local high school students like Ella Ray McKenzie. Riding the rails each day has helped her reconnect to Alaska, watching visitors marvel at the place she calls home.
I think a little bit in Anchorage, you get desensitized to how beautiful of a state we live in. You go out into the wilderness and there's like nothing around. You just see like these mountains and these glaciers, and it's incredible. I think from their eyes, they're just experiencing all like this overwhelming amount of beauty that is our state, which I think is incredible.